Hey everybody, welcome back to the SuperBake podcast. I'm your host, Baker. Let's talk about stuff. I have been on a, just love, death, and robots kick lately. I had never really watched much of the show before. I watched a clip of one of the episodes with the three robots that walk around and explore a city. But on YouTube the other day, I found one for the episode called Bad Traveling. I saw a clip of it and was really interested in just the story, and I checked it out on Netflix, and now I can't get enough of it. I've been watching just several episodes now. I've watched that one. I've watched the one with the drowned giant, the Swarm, I think is what it's called, and then the freaking Cthulhu episode. God, that show is freaking good. I can't get over how good the 3D animation is too, and even there's some episodes that are 2D animation and they look pretty good as well. But that's a episode for another time. But if you haven't watched that show, check it out. It's actually really interesting. All right, today, better late than never. Finally got the review up for Prey, the new Predator film on Hulu. So watched that movie twice now. Wanted to watch it at least twice to kind of get my thoughts together on this one. So, directed by Dan Trachtenberg, who also apparently directed 10 Cloverfield Lane. That was his first feature film, and this is his second one. Movie stars Amber Midthunder as Naru and Dakota Beavers as Tabe. Apologies if I'm butchering those names. Cinematography was by Jeff Cutter, music by Sarah Schrackner. Of course, released on Hulu on August 5th, 2022, and also released at San Diego Comic-Con July 21st, 2022. Something interesting about this movie that I found out as well was that it plays in both English and also Comanche. So I thought that was a cool little detail they added in there. Just to give a brief summary of the plot, so the movie takes place in 1719, so of course, obviously, this is a prequel. It takes place in the Great Plains. You have the character Naru, played, of course, by Midthunder, a young Comanche woman who's also a healer who basically wants to become a great hunter like her brother Tabe. While on a hunt for a mountain lion, they discover that there is something in the woods nearby that appears to be inhuman, and it's unlike any animal they've encountered. And this, of course, is the iconic Predator character, who is on a hunt of his own, essentially trying to take down the biggest, baddest prey he can find. First, he starts off hunting the local wildlife, and then eventually he moves up to human prey, and more specifically the Comanche tribe. And so basically, Naru has to essentially use her wits and her ingenuity to try to take down the Predator. That, in a nutshell, is the plot of the movie. I'll leave you to watch it for yourself, because I definitely recommend watching this. So, just going to kind of get into some of the nitty-gritty of this film. So, first off, just to kind of give my overall thoughts, which I'll go into more detail near the end of my review, like I normally do, but this movie kicked ass. It was exactly what I wanted it to be from a Predator film. So I'm not necessarily a gigantic fan of the Predator franchise. I like the first one a lot with Arnold. I saw Predator 2, I think only once when I was really little. I don't remember a whole lot about it. I know it had Danny Glover in it, and I know it takes place in the city. And I know there's the infamous scene in the end where he's on the Predator spaceship and sees a whole bunch of them, and one of them actually hands him a pistol, which is in this movie. So that's kind of a cool callback that this movie has to the second Predator film. But yeah, and then of course I saw the Alien vs. Predator films. I saw both of those, the first one and then Requiem. I've also seen Predators, which I think is the one with Adrian Brody. And then of course, The Predator, which just came out a few years ago. Saw parts of that movie. I am going to be honest, I do think that as time went on, the movies definitely went downhill. The Alien vs. Predator films have always kind of been sort of a guilty pleasure for me. They're not what I would consider good movies, but they're just like cheesy popcorn movies. I like the versus films like Freddy vs. Jason, Alien vs. Predator, even though I don't think we've gotten a lot of those. But yeah, I like those movies. Predators was fine. It had an interesting cast. It had Adrian Brody, Lawrence Fishburne, Topher Grace, as well as others. But the Predator, I don't remember a whole lot about that movie. Not really. I vaguely remember the plot of that film. It was definitely a forgettable one, in my opinion. But yeah, this movie, though, honestly was a breath of fresh air in the Predator franchise, in my opinion. I think it was definitely what it needed for sure. It goes back to the roots of what I think made the Predator films so great in the first place. Like the very first Predator film, I think is still the best one, but I think this one definitely gives it a good run for its money. I would definitely put this in a close second for sure. But anyways, I'll kind of get into some of the things about the movie and just sort of my thoughts on them. So first of all, I do want to talk about the action and kind of along that same vein, the special effects in this movie. So this is a Predator film, so of course it wouldn't work if we didn't get to see some awesome and gory kills. And in that regard, Predator delivers both handily. The Predator in this film does what he does best, slaughtering unsuspecting humans. And of course, in this film, we also get to see some animal prey show up and take on the Predator as well, which the Predator, kills and turns their skulls into makeshift trophies, a calling card of the Predator aliens. And actually, one thing this film does that I really liked was giving us a glimpse of how the Predator stacks up against Earth's wildlife. I mean, we've seen them kill humans time and again, but I can't recall ever seeing them go up against other predator animals. And in this film, we get to see the Predator take on a wolf, as well as a damn grizzly bear. If you've paid attention to the ads for this film, you've probably seen the bear briefly in the trailer. The trailer makes it look like a very brief encounter, and I mean, it is for the most part. It's not super long or anything like that, but in the movie, we're actually given a bit more in this film, a bit more to chew on in this scene. It's actually a really badass scene to watch, and it gives you a better idea of just how powerful the Predator truly is, and it's fucking terrifying. I'm not going to go into spoilers, but I will just say this. You definitely don't want to challenge this bastard to a fist fight. Just put it that way. Another thing I really liked about this film was that it looks like the Predator actually uses weapons that are less advanced than what we saw in the original 1984 film. Like, it still has the trademark cloaking device. However, in this movie, its iconic shimmer that you can kind of see on its surface is somewhat more noticeable. Perhaps that implies that the tech it has room for improvement. Like in the original films, it seemed like the Predator's cloaking device was just sort of like one solid layer. But this one, it almost kind of looks like it's a bunch of grids that connect to each other. So that was kind of a cool little detail. We also see the alien hunter use a shield device on one of its wrists, which it uses to decapitate several people in gory fashion, as well as deflect gunfire. And the shield itself actually kind of looks a bit more crude than what we might see in a more modern film or a film set in a more modern setting. We still see the 3 red dots from the Predator's iconic targeting system, but in this film, it shoots large bolts instead of the energy blast like what it did in the first film, which I thought was a really cool change. But by far my favorite aspect of this Predator is its mask. So rather than the usual steel mask that we see in the other movies, this one actually has fashioned an animal skull into its helmet. And this gives it a very distinct look from past films that also lends to this being a Predator from a time long past. I really like that about it. And that's something else I wanted to say about this Predator, is that out of all the Predators I've seen in the franchise, I think this one is probably my personal favorite just in terms of how it looks. Its design is it's not drastically different from what we've seen in other Predator films, but just like the mask and the way it looks without the mask on, it definitely just looks creepy. And just very intimidating. I think this Predator and the Predator from the first film are probably the creepiest looking ones, in my personal opinion. The only negative thing I have to say about the action is that there are moments where you really have to suspend your disbelief a little bit. Naru's growth into a capable hunter does feel believable, but as we see that she has a lot of skill before the plot really gets going, like as a healer, we see her collecting, various plants to use to help heal people when they get hurt or sick. Like there's a scene in the beginning of the movie where she helps one of the wounded Comanche warriors. She gives him some flower petals to essentially cool his blood down to slow down his bleeding, I think, so they can get him back to camp. So she obviously knows a lot about tracking and how to heal people as well, and she's got some decent skill as a hunter. But there are definitely some scenes I felt a little hard to believe. And again, I don't want to give away too much, but we see her set a trap near the end of the film using one of the Predator's weapons, which felt a little odd to me. It's like, how would anybody be able to figure out how its technology works? You know what I mean? I feel like the Predator's technology is so far advanced from anything that we have. Even today, I just feel like I know I wouldn't be able to figure it out. I'd probably end up blowing my damn head off or something like that. But I mean, it's a movie, so I mean, I'm not going to gripe about that too much. Another thing that I noticed was when we see her climactic final confrontation with the Predator, there are times where she probably should have bit the dust big time. But she uses her knowledge of the land and setting traps to outwit the Predator rather than try to engage it in a straight-up firefight. And that's something that I really liked about this movie. This was a nice detail, and it really gave the feeling of hunter versus hunter that I really wanted to see from this. I think that's where the film really shines, when we see the Comanche warriors using their knowledge and hunting skills to outsmart the Predator. In the original film, Arnold and his team had ARs and LMGs to take on the alien, so they had obviously more advanced technology than what you would see with Comanche warriors in this movie. But granted, they got their asses kicked pretty hard, but you could at least make the argument that they weren't hunters or trackers. They were just, commandos or soldiers carrying out orders for a mission. Here we actually have Comanche warriors who, while at a colossal technological disadvantage, at least know how to track and evade danger. This makes for some interesting action scenes. I just wish we could have gotten more of these moments. And this actually has me wanting to see future installments with the aliens taking on other ancient groups of warriors. And that was something that I was thinking about a lot with this movie, is one thing that I would really like to see, to kind of go along the same vein as this film, is maybe another Predator movie where we get to see them take on maybe samurai or shinobi. Regardless, this is a neat idea, and the film almost fully capitalizes on it. I will say there is one scene where they bring back an iconic line from the first movie, "If it bleeds, we can kill it," which is Arnold's famous line from the first film. And I'm going to be honest, this felt very out of place, as there really was no reason for the character to say it other than that it's just a cool line from the original. So, I don't have a super big problem with it, but it definitely was a little bit distracting if I'm just being perfectly honest. But any other than that, I think the action is fantastic. But kind of in the same vein with the action, I do want to talk a little bit about the special effects as well. So overall, the special effects in this film are, they're pretty good. It definitely seems like watching it that a lot of the budget went towards the CGI on the Predator. I know the Predator, there actually was an actor in a suit playing him, but there was also a fair amount of CGI, especially like on the Predator's face, particularly when he doesn't have his mask on. You can definitely tell it's a CGI face. As well as when the Predator is moving really fast through the trees and the cloaking device, you can tell that that's CGI as well. And like I said, it looks pretty good and pretty convincing for the most part. But the reason I say that I think a lot of the budget for the special effects went towards the Predator is because there are some moments in the movie, particularly when you're seeing Naru hunting as well as the Predator hunting, animals and wildlife. They use CGI for to animate deer, wolves, and of course the infamous grizzly bear scene. And that's where the CGI gets pretty noticeably bad, in my opinion. It's not terrible, but it's definitely noticeably low quality, especially in comparison to the Predator. I think it looks better when they have nighttime scenes. So there's a scene earlier in the movie where they're hunting a mountain lion. And again, you can tell watching it that it's clearly a CGI creature, but I think the fact that it's at nighttime, I think kind of helps cover that a little bit. The bear scene takes place during the day, so unfortunately it's definitely a lot more noticeable in that scene. Although I do think that they did a pretty good job of capturing the bear's movements and mannerisms. It looks pretty convincing, it's just that the CGI itself just is not the most impressive looking. But again, like I said, I watched this on a 4K TV, so it could be that simply the resolution just made it look a little bit more noticeable to me. I don't know, but that was something that I noticed in the movie. And while I don't think that takes away from the film overall, I still enjoyed it tremendously despite the special effects being a little bit lacking in some scenes. Honestly, it was something that I did kind of notice, and I could definitely see where some people might be distracted by it. I'm not as harsh on special effects as, some people that I know, but I can definitely see where some people would probably find it just a little bit distracting. But to each their own, I suppose. But beyond that, I think the rest of special effects, the movie looked really good. The fights, especially there's a big firefight towards the end. That part's really good. And it's got a lot of really good scenes in it, especially between Naru's character and the Predator. And like I said, I think that's where the film really shines. Is it when you see these two characters interacting with each other, and more specifically the Comanche in general trying to take on the Predator, I think that is when the film is at its absolute peak. And then another thing I want to talk about was just the acting in the movie overall. So Amber Midthunder, she plays Naru, and she is the center of this film. Which I do just want to say, I think that last name Midthunder is a really awesome name. I really like that name. But Midthunder, she does a great job of walking the line between being a scrappy hunter trying to prove herself, but also being a terrified human who's clearly out of her depth against the physically and technologically imposing predator alien. Her character is really the only one the audience has to root for, and is also the only one with any sort of character development. Now, to be fair, a large cast of interesting characters isn't necessarily a requirement in a Predator film, but it would have been nice to have a few other characters for us to latch on to. Like the original film from 1984 with Arnold had other expert commandos along with him, each with their own unique personalities that made them feel more like genuine characters. Like you had Carl Weathers and you had Jesse Ventura. Like each one of these characters, they had their own unique personalities to them. And the thing about that was it made the stakes feel higher when they were killed off one by one. In Prey, Naru and maybe her brother Tabe are the only real characters we're given to watch throughout the runtime. The other characters just kind of show up and aren't really given much to do beyond, dying. And while I don't think it detracts from the movie too much, it was definitely something that I noticed. However, I will say I do think Midthunder does a good enough job on her own that cheering her on feels fine in this film. Watching her character develop into a capable hunter as she gains new skills and even crafts interesting weapons and traps against the Predator is definitely a cool sight. If nothing else, it reminded me kind of playing like an older Assassin's Creed game where you discover new items or weapons and that would help make the next fight a little bit easier. Like that was kind of something I noticed, when I played like Assassin's Creed, 2 or 3, or even some of the more recent ones like Odyssey and Origin, where you would kind of slowly gain new weapons and abilities that would kind of make the gameplay just a little bit easier. And I kind of feel like we saw that in this film a little bit with Naru's character. Like, for example, there's a scene where she fashions a rope to her tomahawk to make it where she can recover it quicker instead of having to walk after it every time she throws it and gets it stuck in a tree or whatever. That was a cool little touch in the film. And then like the other thing I like about her character in general is that I like how she's very clever about how she goes about taking on the Predator. Like I said before, clearly, she's much smaller and not as physically imposing as it. So she has to use like traps throughout the movie to try to essentially take it down. And there's some really cool little attentions to detail that they throw in there. Like there's a scene where she notices that the Predator hunts from tree to tree, especially like towards the end when it's fighting a bunch of French hunters. And she basically like sets up traps, like little spikes that she carves out of like wooden sticks, essentially on the trees, so that she'll know that if it comes after her, she can trick it into jumping on those and impaling itself. And there's little things like that throughout the film that her character implements to try to take on the alien, and it's a really cool little touch. There's lots of really cool little callbacks that you see throughout this film that I really appreciate that they added in there. But kind of back on the acting thing, though. So even though I think Amber Midthunder does a great job with her respective role in this movie, and of course the guy who plays her brother, he does really well too. That's the thing is, like, unfortunately, there really are no other characters in this movie. Even some of the other Comanche warriors that get taken out, we never really learn their names, so it's kind of hard to care, honestly. I mean, they get taken out in pretty brutal fashion, but like beyond that, it's, it doesn't really make much of an impact. And there's even some other characters in the movie that are just like these French hunters, but again, we don't really learn anything about them, and none of them really have any characters that really stick out to us, other than the one that one of the ones that tries to capture Naru's character. But beyond that, I mean, there's really not much else to them, and I think that would probably be one of the biggest detriments to this movie. Is just the lack of a cast. It would have been nice if there could have been just a few other Comanche warriors along with Naru and Tabe that we could have, kind of gotten to know a little bit more. The ones that are in the film are kind of jackasses to Naru's character. They kind of treat her like shit. So you're almost kind of rooting for the Predator to take them out. So I don't know. It would have been kind of nice if we could have gotten maybe not a large cast, but maybe just like a couple more characters just to keep the film a bit more grounded and give the audience another character to kind of levitate towards, I suppose. But it's a Predator film, so obviously you come here for the kills and the badass Predator technology, which there's plenty of in this film. So I don't mind that too much. On the whole, though, I would definitely say, as far as this movie goes, Prey is definitely a more than worthy entry into the Predator franchise. It introduces cool and interesting elements that I really hope that Hollywood continues to build upon. While the characters are probably the weakest element of the film, I do feel like Mid-Thunder's performance carries the movie throughout most of the runtime. The action scenes are awesome to watch, and it's always great to see the Predator doing what it does best. You do have to suspend your disbelief in a few scenes, but it doesn't really ruin the experience in my opinion. I would say that I still prefer the original film overall, but this is a close second in my book. It does a good job of building on the lore of the iconic alien hunters while also telling its own unique story and not relying too much on established ideas, minus one cringe line mentioned before. This film could have easily been another quick cash grab relying on a popular movie monster, but instead it actually tries to be better and mostly succeeds in that regard. Check it out and let me know your thoughts on this for sure. I just wanted to note this too real quick. So not sure if anybody else out there has seen this. So I saw on YouTube the other day, like they released a trailer for, it's another one of those, horror movie games. Like they've been on a kick lately making like these, I guess, co-op versus games for these old scary movie franchises. Like they did them for the Friday the 13th. That's been made into a game series, a multiplayer series. They did that for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre recently, and then Evil Dead, which I played that one, and that one's a fun game for sure. And now they've got one coming out next year for Killer Klowns from Outer Space. I don't know how I feel about this. Like, I remember, so that movie came out in 1988, like the year I was born, and it's so funny. I saw that movie, I think when I was in high school. It was like late middle school, early high school, and I liked it fine, I guess. I know it's kind of got a status or it's kind of got a cult following. So, I mean, it's entertaining, I guess. I mean, it's bad, but it's one of those movies that's supposed to be bad. It's kind of supposed to be enjoyably bad. So, I mean, I get it. It's very tongue in cheek, kind of like winking to the audience. And so I like that. It's fine, I guess. I mean, I think I kind of just missed the boat on that movie. Like, it's not bad or anything like that. It's just, I guess maybe like I was a little bit too old when I saw it. I think if I'd seen it when I was a kid, it probably would have left more of an impact on me. But like as a teenager, I just sort of watched it, kind of chuckled at it, but then quickly forgot about it. And now like they're making a video game for it where you can play as the clowns or the people essentially. Like you can play as the killer clowns hunting humans, and then you can also play as the humans trying to survive their attack. Like, the trailer for it's really cool. I got Guardians of the Galaxy vibes from it. I'm not really sure why. Maybe because the character takes place in the 80s, I think, and the character's listening to, like, a headset, kind of like what Star-Lord listens to. But, like, I mean, they do a good job of making the clowns in the game look like their respective counterparts from the movie. I don't know if I'm gonna get it, though. I mean, it sounds interesting, I guess. But I guess my biggest thing is, like, were people really asking for this film? Like, I kind of forgot this film existed for several years, so it just seems kind of odd. They're going to spend millions of dollars to make a video game based on this. Like, I mean, I guess we'll see how it goes. I mean, I'm curious, but I can't say that I'm going to be willing to go out and spend money on this, especially not, how much games are right now. They're freaking $70 for a brand new game, so I don't know if I want to, pop $70 out just to play a bunch of fat ass clowns chasing people around town, but whatever. But that'll definitely be one I'll keep my eye on for sure. I also saw that I guess the Rings of Power has released on Amazon Prime, so I'll check it out for sure. I'm not overly excited about that series. I've seen trailers for it. I've seen some early reviews for it, which were not the best, so I'm not particularly excited about watching that show, but I'll definitely check it out. I think it follows Galadriel from the original trilogy, like before I think it's like thousands of years before the events of the original Lord of the Rings series. So beyond that, I don't fucking know the story of this show. I haven't bothered to look it up too much. You can sense my enthusiasm there. That might be one series that maybe I'll review as a whole for this podcast. I don't know yet. It just kind of depends. But, oh well, regardless, we'll see. All right, guys, I think that's all I've got to talk about today. Just kind of want to do my review and kind of do that little tidbit about the Killer Klowns game. So I will catch you all next time. Later.